Aleph, 1981. And the Rebbe was speaking about that in this week's Parsha. It speaks about the Oren, and it had the Kruvim on it, and the Kruvim had an image of baby faces, children's faces, a boy and a girl. And from this, the Rebbe learns out different things about the chinuch of children. And one of the things that the Rebbe is going to bring in this Farbrengen and this Sikh is also about the chinuch of children when it comes to the idea of Moshiach. So we're going to start from the bottom of the page. As in the last paragraph, 3 lines from the bottom. As ein da solche was teilen, there are those that claim and complain. Wir retten das wegen Moshiach mit Kinder. How do we speak about Moshiach with children? Moshiach is doch an inyan naila. Moshiach is a very high and lofty thing. Biz as Moshiach is der mifcher von mina anushim. Moshiach is the most choicest of humankind. Mit alle milas, with all of his qualities and advantages that we know about Moshiach, is vi lost man arop aza inyan naila. How do we let down and how do we make descent such an elevated thing to a kind, to a child? Verbindet the minim mit prosim, mit tzadkes and we connect it with prizes and with toys that the Rebbe is talking here about Tzivus Hashem, that they give out different prizes, I guess, with we want Mashiach now and so on. Let's skip over. The Rebbe goes on a whole thing about certain people when they're asked this, they lose themselves entirely. So let's go down to 3 paragraphs on the bottom of the page. Chav Beis is the beer of the Taina now, the explanation for this complaint. The ganze Torah is doch gegeben geworden zu jeder Yid kanal. The entire Torah was given to every Jew, like the Rebbe said earlier when he was speaking about teaching children different basics of Yiddishkeit. Und euch zu Kind and also to a child. Warum Torah tzivu lanu Moshe moirasha kilos Yaakov. Torah that Moshe commanded us is an inheritance of the entire congregation of Yaakov, and an inheritance applies equally whether the child is young or old. Das heißt, as man darf mechanach sein a Kind in alle in Yonam from Torah mitzvah, we have to educate a child in all matters of Torah and its mitzvahs. V'alachas kama v'kama b'negeatz ikrei amuna, how much more so when it comes to principles of faith and belief in Hashem. Was ikrei ha'amuna, that the principles of faith and belief Zayin doch Yud Gimel Ikrim. We know that there's the 13 principles of faith as the Rambam enumerates them. Is eine von sei, one of them is that Iker as the principle that I will await him, I will await Mashiach every day that he should come. Was das dirin von Beis HaMashiach hat seit Mashiach's coming. Was der Fund ist verstandig from this understood. As man darf mechanach sein a Kind, euch in dem Iker, that we also have to educate a child in this principle. Skip the parentheses, that in for Mashiach, the idea of Mashiach. Und das darf man reden mit jeder Kind. This we have to discuss with every child. Was lachure kann doch teilen, seemingly a person can claim their Kind gefindt sich in Arts Sabris, the child finds himself in the United States. Is genug, as we reden wegen Torah mitzvahs. It's sufficient for a child in the United States. We'll talk to him about Torah mitzvahs. Und also wie Arzt Habris am Bedinne in welche Alzebarchava, since the United States is a country that everything is very comfortable and big and broad. It's like the Rebbe always refers to the United States government as a government of kindness. That euch dem Chinuch zupassen zu der Anhage von der Medina. So will also make that the Chinuch, the education of the child, should correspond to the way how the country runs. For was da for dem Tummeln wegen Mashiach, why does he have to make a whole big disturbance about Mashiach? Wird noch sagen dem Kind, as Mashiach is a gar geheben Azach. He will tell the child that Mashiach is a very elevated thing. Al derech wie a gildene keli, just like a golden vessel, was man legt auf a hohe Polke that they put on a high shelf. Und b'shas wird älter werden, and when the child will get older, demult wird ihm erzählen wegen dem Merba Riches v'chulu. Then he'll tell the child about Moshiach, this great and lofty thing at great length. or greater length. Aber gehen zum Kind und ihm sagen, but to go over to a child, to tell him, Schrei, as du willst Moshiach. Scream that you want Moshiach. Und sing a song of English, and sing a song in English. Und der Farvest bekommen a Zuckerkir, for that you'll get a candy. Das Teiniter, this is what some people are claiming and complaining. Wie kann man nehmen as a heichen Ingen und ablosen to a Kind? How can you take such a high and a lofty thing and lower this down to a child? If dem sagt man them, for this we respond to him. Das is eine für Yud Gimel Ikrim. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. Und beim Mele darf das Masber sein zu a Kind und ne Mechanech sein dem. Therefore we need to explain it to a child and we have to educate him concerning this. Und ob man lernt das nicht mit dem Kind, and if we do not teach this to the child, is das Hebech an Ikir and the Munna Hebech a Torah. It's the opposite of a principle in faith. That's the opposite of Torah. Chav Gimel, teinet aber noch als, he still complains. How is it appropriate to take such an elevated matter like Moshiach? Und es verbinden mit Prosim, Tzatzkis, and Zuckerkis to connect it with prizes and toys and candies, mit Azaluchi and Yonim Pshutim, with such simple matters, such low matters. Is the Bir Bezad explanation about this is, the Rambam schreibt the Pirush Mishnayos, the Rambam writes in his commentary on Mishnayos, und al derech ze zoich verstandig von Hilchos Tshuva la Rambam, so too it's also understood from the laws of Tshuva of the Rambam, as der Chinuch von a Kind darf sein anhäufen, that the education of a child has to be in such a way, as früher häupt man an mit ihm, mechanech sein, initially you begin to educate him, durchgeben him in Yorm sein Shaich Tze'em, am Takim Yoitzvzeh, to give a child matters and things that are applicable to a child. You give him sweets, kavod amedumme v'chulo, and imaginary honors, and so on. Was das der Ingen from Metech Shelo Lishma Balashma? That's the idea that out of first doing mitzvahs for not the sake of Hashem, you do for the sake of Hashem. Das heißt, as anheben darf mit Shelo Lishma, mit in Yonim Pshutim. We need to begin with a child, this is what the Rambam says, with simple matters, with matters that are not for the sake of heaven. Und afal piasas darf sein, limra Torah lishma, though Torah study has to be for the sake of heaven, was a feel der Inyan von Gan Eden or Habes noch als Shaloi lishma. Even if a person were to study Torah and do mitzvahs, just to be able to receive Gan Eden and just to be able to receive the world to come, that's still not considered for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of Torah. Warum es darf sein in ganzen Shalom Pras. Our attitude has to be completely not for the sake of receiving any reward. Is aber the vile, but still and all, in the meantime, until a person reaches that stage where they have no ulterior motive whatsoever in their Torah study, calls man halt noch nicht bei der Lishma, as long as he's still not by the state of studying Torah for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of the mitzvah, darf ne mechanech sein mit Inyanim, was ein Shaich Tze'em. We need to educate a child with matters that are applicable to the child. See, das ist prosim, whether it's prizes, other geld, or money, other Zuckerkefkeitzvze, or candies, etc. Warum bibalt, as halt noch nicht bei hecher Inyanim, since he's not yet holding at higher things, is kedei zu poil sein afem, to be able to influence the child. He needs to talk with him according to the child's level. Was da sein in Yom Pshutim, these are simple matters. Was der Far Redman, therefore we speak about, as soll Mazu sein, the Kinder, der Inyan from Moshiach. We need to explain to children the idea of Moshiach. Und sie euch Mazu sein, as Bashas Moshiach wird kommen, to also explain to them that when Moshiach will come, weil sie haben a ribuy mamtakim v'kyoytzvzeh. They'll have a lot of sweets, etc. Was davke damit kann man say peilen, because this is the only way at their level to influence them. Der Inyan, as bechdei zu peil sein, kima mitzvahs darf man reden lefierke von dem, if darf peil sein, the idea that to influence and to cause and bring about fulfillment of mitzvahs, we need to speak according to the level of the person that you're trying to influence. Gefindt men euch in Torah Shebeksav. We find this in Chumash. The pasuk sagt, "Im bechkoisek telechov v'goyim rasati geschmechen bit." The pasuk says, if you will go in my statutes, and I will give you the rains in its times. So we see, to be able to influence a person to fulfill mitzvahs, we tell him about a physical reward from Nasati Geshmechem Beitam. I will give you get rains in its times. Similarly, we find the pasuk, open up your hands and satisfy to all living beings what they want. Mefarshim Taichen, as der Wort Rotzen besteht in pasuk, the Mefarshim explain that the word Rotzen, will, that says in this pasuk of Pesach Yedach, meint der Rotzen from the Chai, from the Mensch was bet by the Meibishn. The Rotzen is referring to the will of the living person, meaning the person that's asking by Hashem. Hashem fulfills his will. Kommt from the pasuk. Where does it come from? This pasuk, as der Eibishter öffnet auf alle seine Inyanim. Pesach Yedach, Hashem opens up all of his matters. You open your hands, b'chdei zu geben dem Chai sein Rotzen, to be able to give the living person his will. Das was will, what the living person wants. So we see again that Hashem tailors things according to the level of the person. Top of the next page. Al piece of it euch werden verstandig an ihnen was der Rambam schreibt in den Moshiach's kommen. According to this will also be understood a concept that the Rambam writes concerning Moshiach's arriving. The Rambam schreibt in sein Sefer Yad HaChazaka B'Siyumah. The Rambam writes in his Sefer called Yad HaChazaka. The Rambam is called Yad HaChazaka at its conclusion. Al sapsak din la'alocha, as a ruling la'alocha, as B'shas Moshiach wird kommen, vel madanim sein mitzuyin ke'ofer. That when Moshiach will come, so all pleasant things will be as available as earth, as dust is available. There's a lot of grains of sand and dust and earth. That's how much tasty and delightful things there will be available in this world. Was madanim meint doch madanim begash kipshute. When the Rambam is talking about delightful things, pleasant things, he's talking about physical, literal, pleasant things. Basar shaman v'yayin yoshar, juicy meat and old wine. So the Rebbe asks the same question, the same idea. The Lechura, seemingly, the Rambam redt dorten wegen was es wird sein, wenn Mashiach wird kommen, und schreibt das als Halacha. The Rambam speaks over there about what's going to be when Mashiach is going to come. And he writes it as Halacha, und sagt, dass damals wollen jeden liegen und verstehen, Halakus. And he says that that's when Jews will be involved in understanding godliness. Es wird sein, Yasigu das Boiram, that when Mashiach comes, they will comprehend the mind of the Creator. Is wie passt dort na rein as madanim will sein mitzuyin ke'ofer. How does it fit in? How is it appropriate to speak about that delightful things, physical delights, as we just now said, will be as available as sand and dust? Was madanim sein inyanim, was ein shaykh zu mishcha dechivya, pleasant and delightful things are matters that are connected with the skin of the snake, meaning with klippa and the body. Und sie wollen sein mitzuyin ke'ofer, and they will be as available as dust, meaning as wird gar nicht davon ankommen zu kein Tircha of them, that we won't even have to bother for it, we just have to bend down and pick it up. So how does it make sense that the Rambam should be talking about such a lofty time and describe it with the availability of all delightful things? Is the Bir Bezad explanation this is, according to what we said before, schreiben as B'shas Mashiach wird kommen. Weil Madanim sein mitzuyin ke'ofer, by writing that when Mashiach comes, then delightful things will be as available as earth or as dust. Will the Rambam masber sein dem Inyan von Mashiach's kommen euch zu a Kind, v'kiyoytze bezeh, was Madanim sein beim Teufels machen. The Rambam wants to explain it, the idea of Mashiach, also to a child, or similar to a child, meaning someone that's childlike in his appreciations, that we're talking about such a person, we're talking about a child, that delightful things have significance by him. Was zu a Kind sagt man nicht, als durch Mashiach's kommen, weil den Jahren mit Teure klar werden. You're not going to convince a child to want Mashiach by telling him, you know what, all the questions in Torah that we always had is going to become finally answered. Warum wir verstehen the Meile, darf warten, bis wird älter werden. For a child to be able to appreciate this great quality that things that have always puzzled us in Torah will become clear, the child needs to be older and mature. We need to speak with him specifically about matters that are delights and enjoyable and pleasurable things. That's why the Rambam writes that when Mashiach comes, all delightful and pleasurable things will be as available as earth. Though as when Mashiach comes, all the delightful things will be as available as dust. Is, like we also know the analysis of this, why is he used specifically as available as dust? It could use some other analogy, metaphor to show that it's easily and readily available. Why specifically like dust? So it comes to teach us as das wird sein as a choshev wie offer, that this will be also as valuable and as important as dust. Das heißt, as we wird nicht liegen in them. It's going to be available, true, but we won't be immersed in it. We won't be involved in it. Und das wird nicht teufels makim sein. Now when Mashiach comes, all the delightful things will not have any importance and significance. Because we will be involved in comprehending the mind of our Creator, like we said before. Yet, despite that, 2 paragraphs in the bottom, but at present, these delightful things do have significance by him. Sagt him the Rambam, so the Rambam tells him, as demot when the Madanim sein mitzuim ka'afar, that when Mashiach comes, the delightful things will be as available as dust. Warum dafke durch dem kommen in den Namen? Because that's the way how you will take and attract the child to the idea of Mashiach. 2 lines in the bottom. Chavav. Was al pi dem, was the Rambam schreit, according to what the Rambam writes, is euch verstandig, hammer leil, ben egert, zum mechanich sein Kinder, wegen Mashiach. It's also understood what we spoke about earlier about educating children about Mashiach. As medarf sie sagen, as lost love wird sein Ribim am Tag und Gehetz, that we have to tell them that when Mashiach comes, there will be many sweets, etc. The Lechura, seemingly as verstandig as Torah wird nicht heißen sagen kein liegen. It's understood that Torah will not tell us to say a lie. Is wie heißt das der Torah as ein mechanich sein Kind? How does the Torah command us to educate a child this way? As bechdem is on the namen, so we should be able to grab him and pull him into the idea of Mashiach. Sollen ihm sagen, as b'shas Mashiach wird kommen, weil sein Aribim und Takin, we should tell him that during Mashiach's times there will be much sweets. Wie bald aber der Rambam schreibt, dass b'shas Mashiach wird kommen, weil Madanim sein mit zu ihm ka'offer, but since the Rambam writes that when Mashiach comes, all the delightful things will be as available as dust. Is verstandig, it's understood, as der emes is as the truth is that way. Is b'shas mazok da kind, as b'shas Mashiach wird kommen, weil seine Ribim im Takim. When we tell a child when Mashiach will come, there'll be many sweets. Is nit nor was azoi zot menem. This is not just that this is what we're telling him. Nor azoi is as takim be'emes. This is true. There will be lots of sweets. But the only difference is, he says, the Rebbe says in the parentheses, is mer nit, was wird demot nit liegen in dem Kanal. But when Mashiach actually comes, we won't be involved in it. It won't matter to us. Chav zayin, b'shas, man get the kinder in yonah from am takim, when we give children the idea of sweets, etc., the far was they zayin nitchach to hecher in yonah, because they don't have any appreciation yet of higher aspects. Und dafke das wird sie den nehmen, and this will grab hold of them, is nicht the pshat as they haben nor der inyan from am takim gashim allein. It doesn't mean that now this is all they have. They have only the sweets, and they don't get anything else. Warum oipa so is das shaloi lefierach the minions of welche man will sie memes mechanich sein. If so, it has no comparison to the matter that they want to educate him. Nor, rather, in the mamtakim is the oichan inyan naila. In the sweets, there's actually a very elevated thing. So in other words, we're giving them sweets, but the sweets contain something extra special spiritually, the Rebbe says. So he says like this, ubedugma. An example of this, we does in the kalirte Sachen, was megit Tzivus Hashem. I guess there's some different types of color or colored awards that they would give in Tzivus Hashem. Their farvas das lefiyerkam. We're giving them these colorful things because this is something that the children can appreciate. Their tam was, so the Rebbe says, yes, it's a physical thing, but it has a very deep source. Der Tam war was sein dort waren Gashim was haben in sich der Minen ayofi. The reason why there is physical matters that have beauty to them, und andere was haben in sich nicht in ayofi, and other physical matters that do not have that idea of beauty, is der Farvas die in Yonim was haben in sich der Minen ayofi, because those matters that have that idea of beauty haben in sich an nitzutz kedushim yuchad. Was is shaykh in nayofi? They have a specific spark of holiness. That spark of holiness is connected with the concept of beauty, and this is something that we are transmitting to the child. The spark when we're giving him something beautiful in the physical. Was der far kommt aus, therefore comes out. As b'shas we get the kinder kalirte Sachen, when you give the child colored, beautiful things, their farvas das lefiyerkam, because this is on their level that they can appreciate it. Zayin faran in them, the netzutze kedusham yichodim. There's unique sparks of holiness. Was al derech zeh is euch den yonim am takim was git the kinder. In a similar vein is also the sweets that we give children. Is as as it says da in zeh anitzus miyucha. They have a special divine spark. Was the far zayin zim am takim begashmis. That's why in the physical world, they're not bitter and they're not sour, but they're actually sweet. So the Rebbe says, Chavches, adugma ledavar, an example for this. As you do at their minig, it's known the custom. As b'shas their kind hyped on learning, when the child begins to study, this usually happens when we make a achnasa l'cheder, when we bring the child into cheder. Varft auf ihm, the tata tzia bruder v'kiyoytze b'zeh zuckerkis. So the father or the brother throws upon the child candies. Und mir sagt ihm, als die Zugerkes warft Malach Michal das Arshi Yisrael. And we tell them that these candies, the Malach Michal, the Sar of the Jewish people, the ministering angel of the Jewish people, is the one that's throwing it on them. The Rebbe says, in the brackets, some people say this is a custom of women, but this is a custom of women which is also Torah, and therefore, or custom of older women, whatever. So it's a very important thing. Skip the brackets to the third paragraph. Was l'chure, seemingly, wie sagen dem Kind, as Malach Michal warf die Zuckerkis, b'shas das wart an andere. How do we tell the child something that might be considered an untruth? That Malach Michal throwing the candies, someone else is throwing the candies. Hat namal given in them Barucha, at the previous occasion, the Rebbe explained about this at length. As the emes is takazoi. The truth is that's from Malach Michal. As the Zuckerkes were nimshach from Malach Michal, the Zuckerkes, the candies are coming from Malach Michal. And there was warft whoever's throwing it, whether the father or the brother, etc., warft b'shlichus from Malach Michal. He is throwing it on behalf of Malach Michal, and the Rebbe says, because we know that a shliach, according to halacha, takes the place of the one that sends it. Let's skip over to the next paragraph. Das heißt, this means, as afal pi as der Kind bakumt l'churim mamtakim gashmim, though the child is receiving physical sweets, seien sie aber nicht nor mamtakim gashmim, they're not just physical sweets, nor as is euch in zei da euch b'chias Malach Michal, there's also the level of Malach Michal in them as well. Was al derech zei is das euch die kaldierte Sachen mamtakim g'yetz, was man geht zu Kinder. This is also concerning the colored things and the sweets, etc., that we give to children, the farvas, the inyanim zayin lefi erka, because those matters are according to their level, not just when we bring him into cheder, but let's say for saying we want Moshiach now. And afal pi as zayin l'chura normam takim gashrim, though they are only physical sweets, is in Zaydan, Nitzos Kedushim Miyuchad, there's a unique spark that has to do with things that are sweets and things that are colorful, etc., etc. And the Rebbe goes on that even though the child may not be aware of it, but that spark is still there, and that spark from what makes it sweet or what makes it colorful is also has an influence and effect. Let's skip over a little bit more over here. Okay, we're going to skip over to Ois Lamed Aleph, in the middle of the page, fifth paragraph from the top. The Rebbe brings a certain medrash, how the Eibishter is very joyous with the children, even though they might be jumping around on top of the names of Hashem, which is very, very lofty, but they're learning out of Sfarim, and when the Malamed might go out of the room, they're jumping all over it, and the Medrash says that Hashem loves them for it. So the Rebbe says in Lamed Aleph, as Dosa Beferish, a Medrash is an open Medrash, and Darshanim nitzen the Medrash, and they drushes, and people that give drushes use this quote, und Afel became still on all b'shas mefrek bei mashayla. When we ask a person the question, wie kommt es aroblas na zayin in Naila v'Mashiach zu Kinder, werter in ganzen zu Tumult, when we ask him a question, how do we lower such a elevated thing, such a lofty thing like Mashiach to children, he becomes totally confused. He doesn't know what to answer. So the Rebbe says, first and foremost, he has to know this is true. This is the truth of truth. And as bewald as shlichus from the Sidor Reinu hat es shaykhs of the kinder from them there. He has to know that since this is a mission from the leader of our generation, so this has a connection to the children of this generation. Und ob nor wird nicht gleich zu Tumult werden, if you wouldn't get immediately confused, nor werden sich in der Räufer reintrachten, he'll think into this, but der Zena soll gepasst in der Rambam, will see that the Rambam rules this way, und nach Farim Shloime, even before the Rambam, Shloime HaMelech, was damals given on Sinus Mokim, zu der Scheile, zieht L'chanech L'nar, darf sein al Pidarke, oder Beufenacher. In the times of Shloime HaMelech, there was a question, do you need to educate a child according to his way, or maybe there's a different way I'm supposed to educate him? Umat abgepasst, and Shlomo HaMelech said, as a darf sein al pidarkoi, that you have to educate a child according to their way, according to the level that they're at. Ubemele dafer mazbe sein the meaning from Moshiach to alle Kinder. Therefore, you have to explain the idea of Moshiach to all children. So Amerikaner to Americans, to Französische to French, and to the English to English. British children, or reden zu jeden in seine Eufen, and to speak to every child in his level, in his manner. Und tut nicht also, if he's not doing this, is moil in the B'shlichus von in nach Chinuch, he's foregoing and transgressing his mission in education. Und warum mit übrigem die Kinder zu mechanisch sein sie in allen Jahren von Teure, because the children were given to us to be educated in all matters of Torah. Was is Torah achas? It's one Torah. You can't just break it apart and say certain things are not to be educated, not to be spoken about. Valachas kama v'kama mekenet fanander telling the Yud Gimel Ikrim. For sure, we cannot separate and divide amongst the 13 principles of faith and say that some principles are applicable to children and some principles are not. Und der Reif nach Chinuch, and the manner of the education, Kideas beim Kind soll sein, der Achakelois, that the child should have, I wait to him, because you want the child to also be awaiting Mashiach, not just having information that there is such a thing called Mashiach. As al Sharayin as will have Mashiach, he should shout that he wants to have Mashiach. Darf sein mit that Zuckerke, mit Prosim, Mechulu has to be with a candy, has to be with prizes. Because to these matters, the child has a connection. If you're going to tell him other reasons why he has to want Moshiach, that's not going to talk to him. Since this is a mission of the leader of our generation, he has to go out and see as jeder Kind von dem Deur soll mekayim sein Torah mitzvahs und schreien as will Mashiach, that every child of this generation should fulfill Torah mitzvahs and shout that he wants Mashiach. Was da meint man nicht als eine Kinder, wie die Kinder, was ein Gewinn bedeutet, Chizkiyahu. We're not talking about children the way it was in the generation of Chizkiyahu, was biyam of his botkum medon va by Shavav, like matzu tinik v'tinek shlo bekim bilchtum v'tara. They checked all the way from the north of Eretz Yisrael, in the area called Dan, till the south of Eretz Yisrael, which is Beersheba, and they did not find a single boy or girl that weren't proficient in the laws of Tumah and Tahara. So in his days, it's by Chizkiyahu, Takivan, Bikash Kodesh Baruch Hu, Las Chizkiyahu Mashiach. And by Chizkiyahu, it was a situation where Hashem wanted to make Chizkiyahu Mashiach, but in actuality, it didn't come out. But we're not talking about that generation. Kinder was gefinden sich in der Mitzkinder. We're speaking about children that are found in the present generation. The Dor Far Mashiach, and the generation before Mashiach. Therefore, we have to really rush in and tell the children about Mashiach. And the Rebbe concludes, Lamed Beis, V'yirotza should be the will of Hashem, as noch der ganze Arichas HaDibur, after the whole lengthy speech, Zalman Tom Bepoil, the meaning from Tzivus Hashem, we should do in actuality the idea of Tzivus Hashem, or Kimeduber La'el, like we spoke about, Sif Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, the Iram Yuchedes from the Seder, from the Minna Kruvim, the special directive from our Torah portion of the idea of the Kruvim that were on the Aron, Kravia, that they were like children, was das an Inyan, was man kennes Masbe sein, so Kinder, we could explain this to children, und als man gedarf machen Kruvim von der Kapoiris zum Megen sein, zu erhitten auf dem Arm der Luchis, when they had to make Kruvim out of the Kapoiris. The Kapoiris was the cover. The cover was like a protection for the Aron, and to cover the Aron and the Luchis in it. Was the Kruvim sei gewähnt zu von Menschen, that the Kruvim were made in human form. Hat man nicht gemacht a Zuruf von Ayid mit a weiße Bar. They didn't make an image of the Kruvim of a Jew with a long white beard, nor a Zuruf in Kinderdafke. We made especially the image of children. Let's skip over to the next page. Was von der Fun Zetman, the Geulah Chavivus the Kinder Kenai Yisrael Baveu. From here we see the great love to children that the Jewish people are likened like a child, and I love them. We can also explain to the children as on ze hegt sich ab der Agana from the Torah. Just like the Kruvim on top of the Kapoiris that protected the Aron and the Luchas, the same thing. The children have to realize they are the protection of the Torah. Al derech wie the Kruvim darf gam abgehit the Aron with the Luchas, just like the Kruvim protected the Aron with the Luchas. Was al derech says, you remember Matan Torah in a similar vein, what was by the giving of a Torah. As the Eibusher gegeben the Torah dafke durch them was benein oir from my son. Hashem gave the Torah only through the fact that our children were our guarantors. The says as the kinder's idea was hitting up the Torah ständig, the children are the ones that constantly make sure to guard and protect the Torah. Let's skip down to 3 paragraphs in the bottom. Like we said earlier, as we should speak with the children about the coming of Moshiach. Every single one of the children has a connection with Moshiach. The explanation in this is every child has the entire Torah as an inheritance. Torah Moshe commanded us, it's an inheritance for the whole congregation of Yaakov. Was das is nicht nur wenn Maschel daber, was demot is of him lam de Torah. This is not just that it becomes his inheritance when he begins to talk. And we teach him Torah Tzivalanu Moshe when his father teaches him Torah. So maybe that's when Torah becomes his inheritance. Other than noch, when one might think that the inheritance becomes his when he becomes 5 years old that studies Chumash, or a 10-year-old that studies Mishnayos. Nor davon was das Yerushas verstandig, from the very fact that we're saying that's an inheritance, it's understood as gleich wie wird geboren. Immediately when a child is born, noch farther was maskal adaber, even before he begins to speak, when the father has an obligation to teach his son Torah, how to train the minyan Torah, he already possesses the idea of Torah. Es ist mehr nicht, was wir Poil kommen, as mit ihm nicht lernen, bis maschal adaber. It's only that in actuality we can't study Torah with him until he begins to speak. Aber euch Fardem is Yerush ganz Torah even prior to his speaking. Every Jewish child inherits the entire Torah. Varum ben Yachid nal Abbas was Abbas Yerush HaKol. He is like an only child, and if it's an only son, and if it's a daughter, she's like an only daughter. That a daughter, if she's the only daughter and doesn't have any boys, she inherits everything. And in Torah is the other for Moshiach, and in Torah there's the idea of Moshiach. Va'adrab, and even more so, the Iker for Moshiach is there in Torah. The primary idea of Moshiach is found in Torah. Moshiach heibt in Torah. Moshiach begins in Torah. Und danach kommt up in Welt, and only kommt up in Welt. Only after being in Torah comes down to the world, like it says, "Estakel by Reitzel, Bara Hashem looks into the Torah, and then He creates the world." So everything begins with Torah, including Mashiach. Was der Fund kommt aus. From this comes out as a kind gleich wie wird geboren. Immediately when a child is born, is Yerush the from Mashiach. He inherits the idea of Mashiach. Und der Pfarrer ist verstandig, dass man darf euch mit ihm reden wegen Moshiach. From this is understood that we even have to speak with a child about Moshiach. Was das alles wird bringen Moshiach, and all of the above will bring Moshiach. Was demult wird sein, der Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi v'Anitzchi, then will be the third Beis Hamikdash, the everlasting Beis Hamikdash. As wird sein, v'Osli Mikdash, it will be that they will make from me a Mikdash, and we have stated in the Rambam, like it says in the Rambam, as I said, Tzivui euch auf alle Bate Mikdashim. This is also a mitzvah for all the following Bate Mikdashim. V'Osli Mikdash is not just talking about the Mishkan they made in the Midbar, but every single Beis HaMikdash to be built is included in this mitzvah of Osli Mikdash. Ubefrata Shem Bani L'mayla, especially that this is already built above, as Vet Yerid Zayin Lamata, that will descend down here.